Coming to the most interesting part is the embedded control systems. All the magic that we have seen, connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, motor control, battery management system, BMS, steering wheel, lane control, adaptive cruise control, everything is working on a software. Everything has to go on a control system. Everything requires some logic, some brain behind it. Uh, it's a little heavyweight, so I'll give 2 minutes break. Everyone wants to take relax, and then we'll continue with this topic. If anyone has a question, I would really love to answer them.
Hello, sir. One
Yes.
student has dropped a query to me. Sir, in
Mhm.
car where all of this data processing takes place, which type of technology ensures communication between vehicles one to one?
Yes. So this is a very broad question where it happens. Right now, our car has around 10 to 15. In India, there are 10 to 15, I would say, microprocessors which are controlling various systems like braking, emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, different systems, different controllers, different systems are there. They communicate through a protocol called as CAN protocol with each other. And there is one central unit which will control all this. So there is a master that is called a central control unit, a central gateway which will gateway. So for example, imagine that this is a gateway. Data from one ECU, electronic control unit, which is where the all the processing happens, comes here and it goes to here. For example, uh, if in adaptive cruise control, imagine that there's a car coming closer, the radar will send data to central gateway. Oh, there is a car coming closer. So what? So central gateway will send a request to the brake control unit, with saying that, oh, there's a car coming, reduce the speed. Brake control unit will process that data and brake. Now that car goes away, radar says, okay, the distance has increased. So this will send it to the powertrain control unit. It will say that the car is gone. Now you can accelerate. Now the accelerator pedal will get pressed. This all actuators are there, which will start accelerating the vehicle. And when it reaches a certain speed, it will again idealize, the acceleration will be idealized. So there is something called a scan communication, which takes place between these units.
Okay, so there is one more question. Can autonomous vehicle connect to different companies or different cars from the different companies? I mean, students want to ask that there should be a common software to connect with each other, or they can have their own softwares and still connect and communicate with each other.
Uh, there is no common software, but there is common protocol. There is a common protocol that has been developed. There is a common standard. Like, for example, 1+1 is equal to 2. Even if you study in Mumbai, you study in Pune, 1+1 is equal to 2. That is the standard. So there is a standard defined by SAE. They are starting to write more rules on this because this technology is taking hold of autonomous cars now. Now that we are moving from autonomous level 2 to autonomous 3 and 4 soon, maybe 5 years, these things will come in and there will be a common platform to communicate, but not a common software.
Okay, so there is one question from my side. I've seen a video where Tesla is moving through a graveyard and it is reading tombstones as people.
Yes.
So what are your comments on this false detection?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
The car is moving through the graveyard and there are tombstones around it.
Sir, actually it is moving on road and there is an adjacent graveyard on the left side. So basically Tesla is trying to detect human activity or pedestrians in front. So it mistakenly detects two tombstones on the left of the graveyard as individuals or pedestrians by mistake.
Exactly, that is what is. Jugal, do you want to say anything? Add to the
That's the
question?
same question. I just want to say, what's your comment on this false detection?
So it's definitely a fault, and Tesla will fix it, because if the tombstone was kind of a humanoid kind of shape, it might have detected that way. It has initial, like in 2-3 years time, it has even detected trees as humans, because the trees have that kind of structure. From a distance, if you see, it looks like a man standing on the roadside. But with like Tesla is doing an amazing job with computer vision, which takes a camera feed, processes it, and it has so much data. So you think that I was telling about Waymo, it has 2 billion miles of data with it, but it has collected that data by driving on its own. Now imagine there are 1 million Tesla cars running on the road. Tesla is collecting this data continuously. So imagine how much data they have. Like they are getting 1 million miles every day kind of data to train their models. The artificial intelligence model, the computer vision model, everything. They have so much data to process and train it, that maybe if that came 2 weeks back, Tesla might have released a software update and got that bug out by now.
There is one more observation by student. He said that he has seen a video where a Tesla is detecting other company car as a garbage can. So I think
That I have seen that video. It was a prank. It was a prank for sure. That video that is been the Tesla took that video very soon from the original post, because he took the video recording of that car and he updated that tag saying that garbage can. It's kind of against the ethics, so Tesla had to react to it, but it's not an original thing.
can we use infrared radiation emitted from humans to detect if that's indeed a human or humanoid object?
Indeed a humanoid object? No, but there are there are cameras which have thermal catch, which will be able to detect humans with the thermal mapping that is there.
So any idea how Tesla is handling such huge amount of data generated?
They have a huge data center, maybe as big as like it's a huge data center. They are just collecting data and they are saying, so when you subscribe for the autopilot, you have one of the terms and conditions that we are going to collect all your data. It's kind of a privacy breach also, because there are a lot of people who say that now Tesla knows where we are going and what kind of people we are meeting, who is sitting in our car. It's kind of a privacy breach.
Okay,
but
so do they own it or they are outsourcing it?
They own it.
Oh.
They own it. That data is all owned by Tesla. They do not leak that data, but still, more or less like the Facebook breach, which had happened a couple of years back, and still people are complaining about it. Tesla also collected, but they said that we are collecting external data. But there were some instances where inside the car there are 2 cameras that also data was being collected. Big privacy breach it was.
So can we use location sharing from phone to the companies and make assumptions or make reductions that these are the humans? I mean, if the car is failing to detect a humanoid on human, then can we use people's live locations and detect that that person is human or that thing is human?
It's a very good technology, but everyone will have to share their location, and people are not doing it. People don't want to share their live location with some third party owning their location every now and then.
Okay, sir. What if someone hacks the car?
Every year Tesla does this competition. They call all the hackers. It's an open competition. Whoever can hack into Tesla car, they will give them a car and $1 million because they found a bug. That is how Tesla keeps fixing their security breaches.
Okay, sir. I think
but if someone is able to do it, they can suddenly brake your car, like put a brake on your car from a computer sitting in somewhere, and they can even accelerate to maybe 100 and 150 miles. So it's a big breach, but Tesla keeps hold on it, and all the EV companies, all the OEMs have such a high level of security protocols and encryptions that even if someone is able to hack into the system, that encryption in the system, there is a second level firewall kind of encryption, which is very difficult to crack down. So no, it cannot be done, and it has never been done till date. Like on a open vehicle, it has been done in a controlled environment, like in a competition or in a kind of situation, but no one has been able to do it.
Okay, so you can go ahead with the PPT. I think there are no more questions in the chat box.
Okay, sounds good. So let's start with the embedded control systems. As I said, that is the backbone of the whole future of autonomous vehicles and other technologies, auxiliary features. So what is embedded systems? So embedded system is a combination of computer, processor, computer memory, input, output, peripheral device that has a dedicated function within a large mechanical or an electronic system. So embedded is in the system. So it has everything in it. It has a processor, it has a memory, it has input, output, peripheral. For example, there's a computer. There is a small computer. Everyone must have seen the microchip, which is there, like Arduino boards or a Raspberry Pi boards. They have input output. You can program those boards, and then you can control various input outputs. That is the smallest possible embedded system. Or you have a remote control car. There is a remote control in your hand that has an embedded system in it. Your TV remote control, embedded system. It has a peripheral, right? In a remote control, there is a small sensor in the front which will communicate the signal with the TV, whichever button you press. So your remote control is an embedded system. Then it's come to the control system. The control system is a set of interconnected devices that controls the behavior, functionality of other devices. So an embedded system is an part, and control systems is a multiple embedded systems built together. So you can have, as I said, right now, presently in India, every car has around 10 to 15 small embedded systems. There is microcontrollers. In US, the number has already crossed 80 because there are so many smaller functionalities which are controlled by my microcontrollers, like windows up and down. That is one function. You turn, there is a display. There is a infotainment control system, infotainment embedded system, which will take control of that. Your phone is a control system. That it has a mic, that is a audio controller. It is a display. There is headphones. There is so many other things. So it kind of communicates. It shares. It shares its functionality. It is interconnected. It's dependent on one command to other command. The moment you click a photo, it will send a request to the camera module or camera microchip. Oh, capture the picture. You capture a picture. It will convert it into a digital format and send it to the memory. It goes to the memory control unit. So that's how a control system works. It can have many parts, two or more, and each part affects the performance and properties of the whole system. Sometimes when you click a picture on maybe a phone which you own for maybe 5-6 years, once you click a picture, phone slow ho jata hai. That's how it is, because your camera takes a little longer to capture the picture, because over a period of time uska performance kam hota hai, to pure system ka performance kam hote jata hai. So that's how these systems affect each other. Let me put some light on how this embedded control system was evolved over a period of time in the automotive industry. So in 1970s, the electronic part was very, very, very less. It was practically absent. Everything was mechanical and electrical. There was no electronics in it. So For example, there was a carburetor which had a cable which when you press the accelerator, the carburetor valve will open up, so the fuel air mixture will take. The spark timing was based on the camshaft. So whenever that camshaft hits, the spark plug will open, the spark plug will close, the valves will open, the valve will close, and the voltage regulation. So if you want to turn on the light, you had a knob on your side. Whenever you turn it, the resistance used to change, and hence the lights will turn on. So that's how in 1970s was. But 1970s to 80s, some electronics started coming in because there were more precise, there were more standards added. There was and the global warming started taking place, people got aware, so there were stringent emission laws. So there were actuators and logical controllers that were added. So now your carburetor had certain algorithm to it. There are certain codes behind it, that if the accelerator is pressed this much should be the percentage of the carburetor valve open. If you press it full throttle, what happens? If you release it, what happens? The injection system, the spark plugs and all, that whole actuator system was again based on electronic, and fuel injection was dependent on that. Then we come to 1980s and 90s, uh, where microcontrollers were developing, parts were advancing. People wanted more high-tech cars. They wanted stereo in their car, which could connect to their, maybe phones were not there, but they wanted a CD player, they wanted a cassette player. So there were much better electronics that were added. There were onboard diagnostics added. So OBD1, right now there is OBD2. So there was OBD1 that was added to take the diagnostics, take the information about the engine control. How is the engine control module working? How is the powertrain control module working? So there was gear systems, which still had, which is still mechanical in 90s and 80s and 90s, but it was having some feedback to the unit to control it. Like if the gear is this, how should the engine behave? If we are in third gear, how should engine behave? There was certain CAN communication and certain communication happening. Not CAN communication, but certain direct communication. Because CAN came in 1990s by Bosch. Bosch is where they created this CAN protocol, which is widely used in automotives right now. It's like a communication channel. It's a communication language basically between two electronic units. They encrypt the messages, that is for the security purpose, so that if anyone intercepts through the hardwire, they will not be able to decode it or maybe encode a wrong message on the channel. It's very protected. So that started happening in 1990s until current. Now the cars have 30 to 100 controllers, which controls powertrain, UTake, stereo, auto air conditioning. There is a feature called, as if you're driving really fast on a highway and you're listening to a music, the volume will increase as the speed increases. And as you reduce, this volume decreases. That all happens because it is able to communicate the vehicle speed to that controller, which controls the volume of the stereo. And it will be able to adjust the volume to the comfort of that. Now you have maybe multiple speakers in the car and no one is sitting behind, so you want your voice to be in front. You can control through that control unit. That all happens due to the embedded control system that is built in your car. There are two, let me go into more detail about, there are two control systems. One is a open loop control system where you give an input and you get an output. There is a logic added, there is an action, and there is output. And good example is accelerating the vehicle in a normal scenario where you press the accelerator, that is your input. Logic goes in, it sees that, okay, the accelerator is pressed this much percentage. What is the action? Oh, open the throttle valve. It will push in more petrol. In electric vehicle, it will increase the current to the motor. What is the output? Your vehicle speed increases. It has no feedback. The vehicle speed increases. That's it. Till the time you press the accelerator, it will keep doing it. The same is with braking. Is a very good example of an open loop. In a closed loop, there is an input, there is a logic, action, output. Output will give out a feedback to the logic again. So for example, take the same scenario of acceleration and stopping which was there in open loop, put it in the adaptive cruise control. Now you are driving the car, the vehicle is driving, you were at maybe 30 kilometers per hour and you set your speed to maybe 80 kilometers per hour. Now that was your input. You started the adaptive cruise control, you set the speed to 80. Now your logic will say, oh, now my speed is less, let us accelerate. Action, same as acceleration. Output is the speed is increasing. It is sending the speed to the logic. It is seeing, oh, the speed is still below 80. Till it reaches 80, it will keep going in the loop. Now, suddenly there is a car in front of you. You have set a distance also. Now the input, there was one more input which came to logic, that was keep a distance of maybe 50 meters. Now your logic says that, oh, my distance is 40 meters. Wait, I have to brake. Action sent to the brakes. Action sent to the acceleration is, oh, stop the acceleration. And brakes will start reducing the speed. Now output will come. The distance is reducing. Distance is increasing over a period of time. I'm at 50 meters now, and the loop is over. So this is how the closed loop control system happens. Another example is lane keep assist, where you turn it on whenever the cars detect that your car, whenever the sensor detect your car is leaving the lane, it will send a message, feedback message, saying that, oh, your car is leaving. It will steer it back to the lane. If it's going right, it will turn to the left. Going left, it turn to the right. It will maintain. It's a curve. It will start turning. It is straight road. It will again back it. It's a closed loop control system. It takes feedback. It takes some responses. Takes some calculation decisions. There is a lot of things that happen in a car. Not one, but that's why there are multiple computers for different systems. And then there is one central computer which will still have all the data coming in so that the other systems can communicate easily and efficiently. How is this code written? There are two ways in which a code is written for embedded system. One is handwritten software, where you know the programming language like C, C++, Python. You start developing the code. You start developing various modules for various programs, functions, classes. Everything is done in a handwritten way, and you compile it and put it in the hardware, and the hardware works accordingly. There is another way which is more graphical, where it is Simulink, MATLAB, or AutoSAR. In Simulink, MATLAB, you define everything small models. So in here, if you see this example over here, this white image, it's a Simulink model. It is a model where it will take certain inputs, certain outputs, take decisions, take feedbacks. And when you finally put this model and compile it, it will create. So end result of both of these is a binary, which a computer which is a microcontroller will understand. It's a different way in which it has been designed, it's written. So some companies prefer going to MATLAB Simulink models. I worked in both the scenarios where I have worked in MATLAB Simulink. It is more illustrative because you can see what's happening. You can have more diagrams like lines and flowcharts. And there is C and C++ coding where it is plain text with a lot of logic, while loop, if loop, for loops, etc. There's so many other stuff that happens, and there's a code. In the back of MATLAB Simulink, it is the same C code which is being generated, just that you don't see it. But in this one, in the handwritten software, you start typing, you start writing the code. The final result is you get a software which you put on the vehicle. Once your software is ready, when your developer sends you, oh, this is a software, like go back to the times when I think if I say I'm an automotive tester, what do you imagine? Oh, इसके पास एक गाड़ी आती है, ये गाड़ी लेता है, इसकी कुछ चेकलिस्ट है, ये गाड़ी चलाता है, चेकलिस्ट टिक मार्क करता है. Yes, that was happening 20 years back, not now. Now it is all software codes. Yes, the mechanical parts are still tested on the vehicle, in the prototype vehicles, but the software, the embedded system is not put on the vehicle for test. So there was a road test, then there was a lab. After that came a lab test where you run the vehicle on a dynamo. You put the vehicle on a dynamo, or you keep driving it as if you're driving it on a road, and you collect data. You see all the pros and cons, what's happening, how is it reacting. That is how lab testing is used for suspension, transmission, NVX, a lot of other things. Lab testing is used. But now when it comes to the embedded software, embedded testing, all other features, it is all math. It is all math because it's all programming. So we as a software test engineers and software development engineers, we create software, we run them on a simulated environment, and then we check the how is it working, what are its reaction, what is the expected reaction. Like today I'm going to show you a small program and a small test in the end, like 10 minutes, and which will you understand what happens exactly as a test engineer. It's no more sitting on behind the wheels and driving the car. It's more than that now. It's more in-house, or it's more in a closed walls. It's on computer in a simulated environment that we test. Why did we go from road to math? Because now imagine that you have a car, you created a prototype, you put everything in it, you drive it. To create a prototype, it takes around $1 million. That is close to 7 to 8 crore rupees to create one prototype. Now to create one prototype, it takes 6 months. Now imagine, the moment your 6 months your prototype is ready, the technology is old because someone has already worked on it. Some maybe Mercedes new technology already nikal diya, BMW still kaam kar rahi hai. The competition is cutthroat, so you have to be really fast. So now the things have gone into more on math, because today the software is ready, tomorrow morning I know what are its results, I know what is its reaction, what is its behavior, what is the performance, how good endurance my software is giving. Everything I know tomorrow morning, because in 6 months time I will have something which is completely different than what I had started like 6 months before. So it's a different environment right now due to the embedded systems coming into automotive with so many things like autonomous vehicles are there, and a lot of features that we are demanding from the OEMs. Now the OEMs are going very different on us. So companies are moving. So this point which says the companies are moving from full system. Full system is a vehicle to subsystem. Like now only powertrain is tested. Yes, you can test powertrain in an isolation. You don't need to put it on a car. Now, if there is a powertrain and there is a smaller unit, for example, in a powertrain, there is a gear, there is a gearbox. You can test that gearbox only, that is subsystem. So that's how granular you can go in testing. And then you can all combine it into one good product, one big product. So it really helps because of that. So because we are advancing into the electronic age, now the competition is higher. Now we know that we have to be first in the race. Like Tesla is developing something, but I'll tell you, the autonomous vehicles, everyone hears about Tesla, but the area where I stay, you just Google like autonomous vehicle companies in San Francisco Bay Area, 100 odd companies will come up. You will find companies like Waymo, Nuro, Neo, like these are all rhyming names, that's why I know. Aurora, Voyage, there are so many. So to beat these companies, we have to be very fast. So software testing is the real integration, like continuous integration, continuous testing. We are doing it every now and then in the math world. Now let me go to the software testing and how it's divided. So there is a software in loop where just the software, where we take the code, test it. We don't need any hardware. We don't need any scenarios. We just need one input, see what is the output. Like अगर मैं 1+1 दे रहा हूँ, तो am I getting 2? That is software. क्या मेरा software सही से addition कर रहा है? Software testing. Today we will see one good example of software in loop test that I'll show you. Then comes the model in loop. Model in loop is where we create a subsystem. Like now we take the transmission, put in a simulation environment. अगर मेरा road का gradient इतना है, if my road friction is this, what happens? Is my gear changing properly? Is if I put it on the auto, like if there are everyone have seen auto cars, is the gear changing at the correct time? So we put it in the model in loop. Then we put this in hardware in loop. Hardware in loop, there are various different ways where we check it on the exact hardware. Is hardware happening? So now we see that now when I input a gradient of this, friction of this, what is my gearbox? Is my gear changing in real time? Then we start integrating into hardware. So subsystem testing, system testing, vehicle testing. And finally, the vehicle testing that everyone imagines someone sitting behind the vehicle is a last stage in a software test. So that happens around after maybe 2 months, and there is a 2 months process cycle for the first 5 steps. So that's how embedded software is playing a big role in our automotive world. There is no more mechanical test. There is no more only mechanical testing. There is electronic testing, software testing, there is scenario, there are different engineers. So don't think that automotive is just a mechanical engineer ka kaam. It is now electronics, communication. Because of the connected vehicles, communication engineer comes in, electronics and telecommunication. Mechanical engineer comes because there is suspension, there is powertrain. There is computer engineer because there is a code. There is electrical engineer because there is electric vehicles. So vehicles is no more a pure mechanical domain. It's a open domain. Everyone has to play their role to make it a success. So that's how we'll go from automotive to, or we were in automotive 1.0, that is IC engines, manual cars. Everyone was driving amazing cars. Now we are in automotive 2.0, where electric vehicles have come in, where we are become more energy we are more of a you want to save energy, conserve energy, you want to play a role in the greenhouse saving, global warming kam karna hai. And now in next 10 years we'll be entering automotive 3.0, that is autonomous vehicles, where we will be free from driving and we'll have more time in our hand. There will be less cars, as we know, and in the future is going to be really different when it comes to automotives. Like maybe 10 years down the line, the kids will not know what driving means, or they may not know, because driving will become a passion. Like you see people driving vintage cars, you will see people driving manual cars maybe 10-15 years down the line.
Sir,
Yes.
On the topic of software testing, there is one question that
Yes.
Can we predict the discharge of battery according to the road condition, and so that we can keep a backup of charging battery?
Yes, absolutely. So now when you start driving from a place A to place B, if it is more than your mile range, the car will tell you, okay, you start driving here and then you stop here, because here you will need to charge so that you can reach point B. So it will automatically tell you that it will do the calculation and it will tell you where is that mid stop point where you need to charge, and that will help you to take to the point B. Yes, it can predict.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir, you can go ahead with the topics. We'll discuss the other questions at the end.
Okay, sure. So mainly my expertise or my domain is Python based testing, because one, and everyone, like most of the companies, automotive companies, tech software companies, they, wherever software is there, Python based testing is plays a major role, because it is modular. It has a wide range of open source libraries. You want to play with Excel, Python will let you do. You want to play with photos, it will let you play with photos. Videos, yes. CAN communication, any kind of things, Python has an open source library. It's a dynamic language. Basically, if you see C, I am sure, Jugal sir, correct me, first year they have C or Java?
C, I guess.
C, they have C programming.
C programming. In C programming, when we start, thank you, Amay sir. When we start writing the code, we declare the variable. It's a string, it's an integer. But in Python, we don't do that, right? We just declare the variable and we can assign a value to it, because it's a dynamic language. Further, it is object-oriented programming, so that you can take various, it's modular, and object-oriented programming. So you can take modules from one place, place it in other program and use it. And in automation also, it plays a big role because it has other libraries which can automate it. And as I said, as a software developer does a change, and automation happens in the background because a Python-based test is automated. It will run the test, and the developer will know that what was wrong if anything fails. So that way, Python-based testing plays an amazing role in the industry. Let us go a quick 5 minutes to the Python test demo. Before I jump here, anyone has any question about what we discussed today? Want to know more? Please let me know.
So there are a few more questions. Ram sir is asking for the list of make of DSP exclusively developed for EV motor drive. I think DSP is a digital signal processing.
Yes, digital signal processing.
Okay. So he's asking for, is there any list of make of DSPs exclusively developed for the EVs?
Not something that I have not presently I have, but if Ram sir, if you want, we can have another discussion on this, and I can send you the list. I really don't have the list of it right now.
One student is asking about how efficient self-driving cars are on the turning road, because they tend to move towards the divider. You must have seen some documentary or some video.
Sure, right. I will answer that question. I skipped one video in between. I would like to show you that video that will answer that question, because it's kind of a revolutionary. That particular DARPA challenge was a revolutionary challenge. So let me just give you the Python demo, and then let me put that video from outside that I have.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question?
There is one question about self-diagnosis of a car. I mean, can vehicle self-diagnosis itself and eliminate going to the service center unless there is a major problem?
Yes, there is self-diagnostics that cars do. So, for example, one of the best self-diagnostics thing that happens is tire pressure monitoring system, where it keeps diagnosing what is the tire pressure, and if it is low, it will give you an alert saying that your tire pressure is low. You don't have to go to service center. You just have to go to the air pump and just fill up there, and that diagnostics will go off. It's kind of self-correcting. Some of the latest cars have an inbuilt pump which is put in the trunk. As soon as it detects and low pressure, that pump is turned on. It's a small pump, and the air pressures are maintained again. But that comes in a very high-end cars. That's not a feature that will come for a regular car.
Okay, sir, you can go ahead with the demo, Python demo.
Okay.
Atharva, so this is the last part of the session.
This is the last part of the session, and then if the time permits, I would like to show that DARPA challenge video.
Okay, no problem.
But
no problem.
Yes,
no problem.
It will take 15 more minutes.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Just wanted a heads up. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So this is a small script that I have devised for a demo. This script, what it does is, let me explain you. It has different functionalities called as accelerate the vehicle, decelerate the car, auto air conditioning, emergency braking, and adaptive cruise control. So there are these features that are being programmed, and let me explain you in short first three functions. The remaining two I will just show you.
Can you zoom it a bit? It's not readable.
Okay, cool. Thank you. What's wrong with this? Give me a 2 minute. Not 2020. Is this readable? Jugal sir,
Pretty
is
much,
this
yes.
readable?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much
Yeah,
readable.
yeah, readable.
Yes. So in Accelerate, so when we when in a software, when we develop this, there is a vehicle which has its own speed, it has acceleration, temperature is car temperature is given, and the distance from the next car. These are the various parameters that we define when we create a function for this. In Accelerate the car, what happens is that we give out the desired speed. For example, this is all happening in an autonomous. Imagine it's happening in an autonomous car. You have a desired speed. What happens is it will check if the acceleration is less than 0. It says that a car cannot be accelerated. So it will give out the command through the powertrain saying that please accelerate your car. And when it receives that acceleration, it will start doing the simple formula. So we all know in mechanics we have a formula that the final velocity is equal to initial velocity plus acceleration into time. So v is equal to u plus et. So this is the same formula that is being encrypted, it's been coded over here, and every second we keep adding the acceleration. So that's why we don't have a time component here, but every second we keep adding acceleration. That's how we get, because we don't know how long it's going to take. So we just keep checking that have we reached the desired speed? No, then accelerate for 1 more second. In vehicles, it is not 1 second. It's the resolution is pretty less. It happens in milliseconds. It keeps checking every milliseconds. But over here, I have for the ease of understanding, I have put it 1 second. And the moment we reach it, it sends out that the speed is reached. It required this much time. I had this much acceleration. Deceleration happens in the similar way. If the acceleration is more than 0 or is equal to 0, it says it cannot be decelerated. So please start braking so that I have a deceleration speed. And it uses the same formula. V is equal to U plus AT, where A is a negative. So it becomes this plus sign becomes negative. And it does the same calculation. Auto air conditioning is also similarly. We have a temperature set on our thing and we say auto. So now there is a certain cooling formula. This is not a very it's not a standard formula. I have used it just for the sake of demo, where the car temperature minus 0.02 into car temperature minus desired temperature. So if the car temperature is higher than the desired temperature, it will say that start cooling it, and it will take certain amount of time. So every second it will keep cooling, and when it reaches, it will say that your desired temperature was reached in this period of time. Emergency braking happens with the distance taking into account. If the distance reduces, it will brake. If it not, it is like good distance, keep maintain the speed, do not decelerate. Adaptive cruise control also happens that way, that if the distance is reduced, it will brake, it will reduce the speed. If it is reduced further, it will stop the car. And if the distance is okay, it will just keep cruising. So to test all these things, we have a we kind of, so this is how the developer will develop a software and give it to the tester. So the tester will now know all the requirements, and what he will do is he'll start developing test cases, so test scenarios, test cases. Like we have acceleration data. So if the acceleration is 5, my initial speed is 10. I know that to check my initial speed is 10. My speed is, I have to reach a speed of 50. It's going to take me 8 seconds because I have done this math in behind. My car will do that math. My software will do that math. And then I'll just check that the time needed was correct. Is the car speed correct? That is my matching. And hence it will check it for everything, and we create a multiple test cases. We keep developing these things so that any changes that happen in the software, these tests have to pass. So let me just show you how the testing happens. Uh, uh, so there is a protocol for this. That's why I'm just changing the name of this file. Whatever test we are developing, it should start with the name test on it. So test car, and then we refactor it. And now Let me just open the terminal. I'm going to just use this window itself. My keyboard is a little unreceptive at this moment. That's why it's taking a little longer. Okay. In the meantime, I will show this. So basically, there are different tests that I have created, and when you run it, they all pass because I know my keyboard is kind of unreceptive and the time is not in our. Oh, it's now typing. So when we run this, so now you see there were multiple tests over here, and then all the 22 tests passed because something was there. If anything changes in the future, if I go here and I do a change, the emergency braking part changes. Like emergency braking has to change at 30, and if I try to run the test, some of these tests will fail, saying that, oh, the software has changed. That will tell the developer that, oh, you have done some changes which is not in line with the requirements. So that's how whenever things change in software, we keep testing it every day and we fix it immediately. We do not wait for it go to the vehicle and see that what's happening. So it's very important for the test engineers to have these kind of controls, and the developers also, because they know that how sturdy the software is. That brings us to the end of the session. I would like to take the question before I show the last video and we sign off. Please, Jugal sir, Amay sir, let me know if you have any questions.
Sir, there are a couple of questions, little bit futuristic.
Yes, definitely.
Is there any developments in electric vehicle flying cars?
There are some companies which are working. They are working on it. So definitely, I would say there are.
According to you, when will autonomous car come in India?
So there are startups like minus zero, and couple of startups. Minus zero because I have been interacting with them pretty frequently, so I know that they are working on it. Everyone is free. Feel free to check their website. They are doing an amazing job at this moment.
Okay. No more question in the chat box regarding EV.
Okay.
Hello,
I am.
Yes, sir. You can share the video.
Yes, I am going to directly put it on.
Certainly not least.
Is everyone able to see the screen?
Big Terramax made its way home after.
Is the volume coming in?
Yes,
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 sir.
yes, yes. It's
Audible.
audible.
Okay, audible, right? Okay.
Welcome to the DARPA Grand Challenge. The objective? Create a self-navigating autonomous vehicle that can safely drive 132 miles through a harsh desert environment without human intervention. Yes, these are robot cars, and if you've ever wanted to see the future, take a good look, because it's right in front of you. The technology we see here will be used in the military within the next few years, and eventually, robots like these may be taking you to and from work. But it's not easy. 43 teams from around the country began with dreams of building a robot capable of conquering this course. Only 23 teams earned the right to run in the $2 million DARPA Grand Challenge Final. For qualifying teams, information about the event is held in tight secrecy until race day. It is only then that they will receive details about the course. At 4 a.m., just 2 hours before their scheduled run times, competitors are informed that the route will stretch 132 miles over rugged desert terrain. With that information now in hand, teams rush to program their vehicles to navigate the thousands of GPS waypoints they will need to pass to successfully complete this challenge.
So here you have seen that they were given the GPS location. So they had certain points marker that if the vehicle reaches that point, it can localize itself. So it knows that where it has to go from point A to point B, and that's how it's important to know the GPS locations.
At dawn, an eager crowd of spectators take their place for a chance to witness automotive history in the making. At the pole, the heavy favorites take the line. Carnegie Mellon's red team will run first and third, separated by Stanley, the blue Volkswagen Touareg from the Stanford racing team. For these teams, $2 million and a scientific legacy is at stake. Red Team Highlander gets a green light, and it's official. The DARPA Grand Challenge is underway.
Ladies and gentlemen, Highlander.
After a quick bow to the crowd, Highlander smoothly turns the corner, accelerates, and heads toward the horizon. 5 minutes later, it's Stanley's turn. Jumping off the line, a sudden left turn at the gate nearly ruins the day for Stanford, but Stanley makes the correction.
So did you see that it took a left turn? Because the GPS location A to B, that is its first point to the next point, was on its left side. So it thought that it has to go direct because the shortest distance is a straight line. But as soon as it took that left turn, it was able to correct because the sensor said that, oh, there is a stone brick on the next side to it. So it was able to correct.
And heads out in hot pursuit of Highlander, traveling 30 miles an hour as it reaches the first dry lake bed. In another 5 minutes, Red Team Sandstorm leaves the blocks, once again demonstrating Carnegie Mellon's precision craftsmanship as it enters the desert. By the time the fourth robot, Team Axion Spirit, leaves the gate, history has already been made as Highlander crosses the 8-mile mark, further than any vehicle traveled in the inaugural Grand Challenge.
So inaugural Grand Challenge, the longest it went was 7.21 miles. So that's why it is a milestone that it covered the 8-mile mark.
20 more teams followed the big three out of the gate, all hoping to complete the 132-mile course in a winning time. Team Dad, with its rotating cluster of sensors, sped off the line.
So this is the first LiDAR, and now they are very small in size. This was the first LiDAR because this is the company, Velodyne LiDAR, which started a journey into creating LiDAR. and now there are much more companies.
making up ground and passing Team Axion in the process. Team Ensco's buggy-style robot Dexter also left the line with a full head of steam, fiercely attacking the desert terrain. Cat 5, the Ford Escape hybrid from Louisiana's Gray Team, eased its way past the crowd, and Terramax, the 16-ton cargo hauler, left the gate determined to finish the course. To finish the Grand Challenge, robots must travel on tight desert roads, over dry lake beds, through clouds of dust, under 3 tunnels, and finally, at the 123-mile mark, through the toughest part of the course, Beer Bottle Pass, a narrow, winding road with a mountain wall on one side and a 200-foot cliff on the other. And early on,
So to answer at this point, Jugal sir, that how does it maneuver on the turns? There are sensors and there are different. So it's a very inaugural challenge. At that time also they were able to go around that difficult spot. The beer bottle pass, it's one of the most difficult. Even when you drive manually, it's kind of a difficult. People go at a speed of 5 miles per hour at that point because it's inclining. It's kind of dangerous because if you lose, you fall in the valley.
the Big Three showed why they were the favorites to win this race. Mile after mile, challenge after challenge, Highlander, Stanley, and Sandstorm flawlessly rambled on, all of them hitting GPS waypoints with human-like precision. As the Big Three continued to tick off the miles, others fell by the wayside. At the 9-mile mark, Team Cornell's Spider was the first vehicle to leave the race after hitting the side of the bridge and failing to recover. After 22 miles, Princeton's Prospect 11 and UCLA's Golem 2 could no longer continue. The smaller vehicles in this race all suffered. Early in the race, Rascal from Team Cyanotics suffered a software problem, and at the 7.5-mile mark, Monster Moto, the ATV-based vehicle from Texas, stopped for good. The reliable Ion from Ohio State and the Virginia Tech entries all stopped within 45 miles of the starting point.
I'm going to stop here because it's more detailed. If you want, I can share this link. You can definitely see it's a YouTube video. One of the most why it's a milestone is this race had all those engineers, all those entrepreneurs who started the journey of autonomous vehicle. So if you take the names like Sebastian Thrun or you take Chris Umson, these are like the leaders in this technology right now. They have their own startups, own ideas, their own IPs. So this was a starting point for all of them. So this race, 2005, they all were there, and that's why it's a milestone for autonomous vehicles. Thank you all. I would love to hear the questions.
Atharva sir, I have a question. Sir,
Yes.
as you showed the video at the beginning, it was the dawn. So it was like, I think 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So the light
6 o'clock.
intensity is obviously low at that point.
Yes.
How does
Yes.
the light intensity based on the time affect the autonomous driving conditions? Are the sensors able to calibrate and adjust within themselves when it comes to driving?
Yes. So the sensors sensors which depend on the light intensity, that is a camera sensor. It kind of calibrates itself. It starts taking longer exposure pictures. The frame per seconds is reduced, but you get a better pictures to start processing. LiDARs, radars, ultrasonic, which have no connection with the light intensity, they play a uniform role 24 hours, not depending on any other things. You could see there was a dust cloud. Cameras couldn't capture that. That dust cloud was it was able to go through the dust cloud because there were LiDARs and radars which were able to detect the objects. If there was a stone on the road, it was able to detect because it was a radar. It was able to move. There's an in detailed video where the first and the second car come very close to each other, where the second car is about to cross, and then it's a very good scene to see that how it passes the first car and it then zooms away. So sensors are very important, but the camera is only which calibrates itself.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, there is one question.
Yes.
What are your comments on wireless fast charging electric car?
It's a technology in development. It's definitely going to take some time. Like we have seen wireless charging in our cell phones. It is kept stationary. It is easy to have that connection, the induction coil, to get in touch with each other, charge. But when your vehicle is moving, it's a different challenge. But we already have a solution for it. If you have seen the Indian Railways, we have overhead power supply where it charges our train motors and train batteries. Have you heard that sound that irritates when you're sitting next to the motor van?
Yes, yes, yes.
In the train. That's because the battery is charging. The capacitors are taking the power in. Yeah, it's
Okay,
a developing
sir.
technology, wireless charging.
I guess we have covered all the questions regarding the session.
Sir, one query from a student. Can you suggest
Yes.
some master's program related to electrical vehicles for a mechanical engineer?
There are a lot of them. One is where I went to school, Michigan Technological University. Second is Michigan University, Ann Arbor, Clemson University, Stanford. There are a lot of them. You can look at it. But these are the leading 4 or 5 universities that I said right now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Jugal, sir, we are done?
Yes, sir. There are no more questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you. Just 1 minute, sir, Amay sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Principal Madam. Thank you, Amay sir, for holding this session, and all the professors and students. It was a lovely session, and I would like to interact more on this topic in future also with the students.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Atharva sir, for this wonderful session, for digging deep into and covering all possible domains of EV, basically touching the embedded systems and the coding part. I hope the students have learned a lot from this session. Before we conclude, I will invite Principal Madam to say a few words. Varsha Madam.
Yes, good afternoon all. And for the first time, a speaker is saying thank you. In fact, big thank you from all of us. Your name is very apt. That is what I can say because it's full of knowledge.
Thank you.
I mean, definitely your parents must have foreseen what you're going to learn in life, and that's why your name is kept as Atharva. That's you are justifying that. It's really a privilege to hear you. And it shows, age does not matter. The knowledge is, in fact, inversely proportional to age in today's era. This is a big lesson for all of us. Once in teaching, they don't go out normally. So getting such knowledge from the people who are, especially youngsters who are studying in other universities on specialized domains, is really a privilege. There's a lot to learn for all of us, especially mechanical and electronics engineers and computer engineers. These are all multidisciplinary fields. There are so many challenging fields, so many fields where you can do your masters by diverting yourself from your core to another branch. It also shows what are the importance of specialized fields and what is the scope for that. Thanks a lot. It was really a great experience. I don't know what is the time there, but I'm sure it's not morning. So
it's close to 12 midnight. 10 more minutes and I'll be the next day.
Your dedication. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Looking forward to hear you again, sir. You really deserve that sir degree, and God bless you. Bright future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Atharva sir, and also special thanks to Sudesh Jadhav sir, who's not here, who had taken yesterday's session.
Yes.
So I extend my thanks to both the speakers. So before we conclude today's session, I will first request Hussain sir to post the link for feedback attendance. Students and faculties alike, I hope you have learned a lot from both the sessions and benefited in terms of knowledge. And I hope the students who have learned of something about EV will try to incorporate that thing in their near future in terms of their mini or major projects or some point down the line, as Atharva sir has already mentioned, as some students have asked regarding masters also. So please, we are looking forward to it, and also we'd like to hear from you about any other feedbacks or comments or any other topics that you would like to see in future. So please go ahead with the link. And I think Atharva sir has also posted the link, full link of that video which he had paused at the end. So you can look to click on that link as well. Keep it open in another window and see it after the session.
Please
Okay.
copy that and share it in the group so that it will be easy.
Yeah. One second.
Yes.
Sorry. Students, keep in mind that the link is open for next 5 minutes only. In the meanwhile, I'll request all the faculties within the attendance to please keep their videos on. I repeat, all the faculties in attendance to keep their videos on. Okay, thank you. Now, faculties can turn down the videos. I request all the students to keep their videos on. All the students in attendance, keep their videos on. Stay back like that. Please wait. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, we are done. Atharva sir, I know it's too late at your end, so if it's all right, you can take leave and you can proceed.
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. We
Yes.
look forward to hearing from you again, as madam has said, in near
Yes.
future. Okay.
Yes. Thank you,
Thank you
Amay
so
sir.
much. Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you so
everyone.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.